Welcome back to my studio. My name is Monica, and we are going to do another piece for the spring series. And you can download this list that I have right here, right from my website. I'm not doing a challenge, I'm doing a series. And I decided, if you wanted to play along, this is all about minis. So whatever you want to do as a mini, whether it's embroidery or a painting, maybe it's a little mini sketch, anything that you want to do. It can be collage too. Just as long as we're building a practice and creating something. And I think once we start with building a series, it's something then that you can always build onto later. So I have been playing around. I've been doing some like little thumbnail sketches and trying to get an idea of which one I wanted to do. So for this one, I think I'm going to do the Dewdrops on Petals. And these are actually little spring buds, and I don't know if they are, what type of flower it is, but they're pink. And the reference photo that I'm working from is from Unsplash. And I can do this one of two ways. I can keep it in this orientation, or I can do it this way. And it's just one of those things, you know, I guess it's personal preference. But I'm going to start off with a sketch, and it's a pretty basic shape. It's a twig with some buds on it, and I think initially I was going to do it this way, and I think I'm going to keep it that way. So I'm going to start off with the twig, and I don't know if you can see this or not. Hopefully you can, but I'm going to sketch this in really lightly, and then I'll put the buds on as I go. So there's a bud here at the top, and a lot of these buds have multiple dewdrops on them, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it pretty simple, and I'll probably do 2 or 3 dewdrops and leave it at that. And I did want to paint the background also, and I don't want to have to mask anything out, so I think what I'll do is I'll paint the background around my shape. So I don't think there's too many nooks and crannies that I have to worry about with this one. I can see that the light's coming from the right side. The highlight is on top of the twig on the right. So I'm going to find the lightest color that I'm seeing. And because the background is actually a lot of greens and grays, it's a really almost like a cool light that I'm seeing on the highlight part of the twig. So I'm probably going to start off with like a light wash of blue. Even though this twig is very dark and leans towards red, I'm going to put a wash of blue in and save that blue for the highlight. So I will just go in here and do a light wash across this entire twig. So right where the bud is coming out of the twig, there is a very light area, and it's not quite white, And it's not really green. It's somewhere between, I would say it's like it's a gray color, basically. And so I'm gonna see if I can't mix up a little bit of just a really light just a real light gray. And I want to put those in now so that I don't forget that they're there and paint over it. So there's a little area right here. And then there's a couple little areas here. Oops. And I can be kind of sloppy about, not sloppy, but I don't have to be exact as far as the shape goes because it'll be covered up with something darker. So I can always go carve out, you know, the little shape that I want to leave, kind of like we did on the butterflies last week. There's that one, and then there's a little bit, it's really blurry in this one down here. So, okay, and I definitely want to make sure that I dry this so that the other colors don't blend into that. And I think this got a little bit too dark. So I'm just using a wet brush to, not sopping, but a damp brush to kind of scrub that out a little bit. Same thing with here and right there. Okay, so I'm gonna hit that with the dryer real quick. Okay, now we'll move into these, the sepals around the petals, the bud. And these are a really, like a dark magenta. But I see some lighter pink in there, so I'm gonna start off with the lighter version of that color, which is gonna be right here. This is wrapping around the bud. And I wanna make sure that I save those little light areas right there. And I always think to myself when I'm doing a painting like this, or any painting for that matter, that this base layer, this light layer that you're putting in, you're really just creating a map for yourself for the next layers. Okay, so I have a color mixed up for the twig itself, which is actually pretty dark. And I'm gonna lay that in, and I'm gonna be mindful of this light edge while I'm laying this in. So I have one pass, I should say a second pass on the twig, and I'm going to go in a third time with an even darker color, and I'm going to add the dark to this area, all of the places that I see these really almost black shadows in here, and preserve these highlights that I have. Okay, I took a little break from this and let it dry, and I'm going to continue on adding a second layer into this part right here, the part that goes around the bud, and I'm just going to pay attention to where I see the dark areas and where the light areas are. And what I'm noticing, especially on this one, it's really prominent. There's like a split kind of in the middle right here. So I can paint that in, and then it's dark around the bottom, and there's a little bit of a light spot left towards the top. So I can clean my brush off and then take a damp brush and soften that edge like that. And then I can do the same thing for the other side. And this one has a little bit more of a light space, and because this is wet on this side, when I dropped that paint in, it just kind of refilled this area with paint. So I'm gonna take a fairly dry brush, a damp brush, and kind of pull this out a little bit. Okay, I can add in what I'm seeing over here too, which is like a dark center line. And I'm gonna rinse my brush, and I'm gonna soften this edge out over here. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. And I do want to darken this up in the center also, since I lost that a little bit. This is still wet right here, so it will automatically soften out. And if I think that those light areas are too light, I can go back in after everything has dried and glaze over it to make them a little bit darker. So I'm going to continue on with the rest of these, and then the last part of this twig should be the buds. Okay, so I finished that, and I think what I'm going to do with these buds is I'm going to try and keep this relatively simple because I can't make out a lot of what's happening here on these. So, because there are like dewdrops all over them, and I'm trying to simplify this as best I can. This is actually a little bit more lavender over here. So I'm going to keep things, like I said, relatively simple. And what I might do is just drop in some of this, I think it's a quinacridone magenta, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. It's a quinacridone violet. So I'm using an opera pink and this violet color to add a little bit of shading to it, just by dropping it in right after I've laid in this opera pink. So I do want to keep some of these light areas in here. So here, and then I'm going to skip over this part. And then I'm going to add in, there's like a dark part here. And I'll see if I can soften some of these edges without losing my light areas. Okay, so the next thing I want to do after everything is dry, and we can always add some more details in here and darken up some areas when we're finished with the background. But I think what I want to do right now is go ahead and lay in some masking fluid for the dewdrops that we're going to paint. So I'm going to grab a junky brush, and if you don't want to use a junky brush, you can always take your brush and coat it with liquid detergent, like dishwashing soap or something. Trying to find a decent brush. Okay, so I have a teeny tiny little brush, and I'm using this little teeny tiny brush because I'm gonna paint in some of these dewdrops or preserve some of these, but I'm gonna paint it in with masking fluid, because we're going to paint the background in next. And I don't want to paint over these. And honestly, if you do paint over them, it's not a big deal because you can go back in with some sort of a white ink or gouache. And I don't know how well this is going to work with this little brush here. There's another little one right here that I want to save. And then there's a big one up here. We'll let that dry, and when I lay in the background, we're going to do just this blurry, nondescript background. So I want to make sure that I've got some of the colors that I'm seeing. It's a lot of blue and it's a lot of green, but it's not super dark. I want to make sure that this is, this stays the dark, but the background's kind of a mid-tone, so I've got to have enough contrast so that these dewdrops will show up. And I was even thinking that maybe I would do maybe a dewdrop on one of these here, and we can do that by scrubbing the paint out, and we'll do that at the very end. But I mean, I'm going to try to avoid those the best that I can because I don't think the masking fluid took very well on that. So I'm going to make sure that I've got a clean brush, and I'm going to wet the entire background. Okay, so while that's drying, and I don't want to use my heat gun because I've got masking fluid, and the last time I used masking fluid on, I think it was this crocus, it ripped some of the paper. So I want to be very careful not to use the heat gun on this. But while this is drying, I can go ahead and touch up some of these other areas that I feel like need another layer because they're not quite dark enough. Okay, so while this is drying and I've touched up a couple of areas, I can also take my brush, and if I want to add a dewdrop on the actual flower itself instead of it hanging, I can take my brush and I'm gonna just start scrubbing out a circle. And then I can take my paper towel or a tissue and kind of blot that up. Okay, and I think this paper is pretty dry. I can scrub out this masking fluid. So when I zoom way in on these dewdrops in this reference photo that I'm using, I can see that there is a reflection of a tree line and the sky and also some trees, which I think is pretty interesting. So I can take this green that I used in the background, and I am just going to drop that in. There is a very distinct line though as far as the tree line goes, so I'm gonna copy that as best I can. When you're painting, like I said, painting this, you're painting reflections and you're painting shapes and you're painting colors. So try and pay attention to that and not so much the actual dewdrop itself, I guess. And it has a dark edge down here, like that. And then there are some indications of trees. So I'm very carefully going to add it just in some lines here. And I'm also going to add a little bit of a dark edge. I'm just going to soften out this line a little bit. I don't want a hard-edged line. I will probably drop a little bit of a light blue or blue in that, but I'm going to give that a second to dry. So the dewdrop that is down here, it has some really dark shapes. And it's reflecting some of the pink. So I want to get that in. And then there's also, you can see the tree line a little bit, kind of in here. There's some green. And then there's also those tree shapes going on again. Okay, and then there's a little bitty dewdrop, and it is here. And it's got a little bit of gray. And then a really dark area towards the bottom. To lift some of this out down here at the bottom because it flooded the whole area. Okay, I'm going to go back up to this one while that's drying, and I'm going to add in a shadow around the bottom, and then at the top, I'm going to add in a little bit of pink. and I'm going to go ahead and hit this with the heat gun. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more dark around the edge of this one. So this little one at the bottom, it's already gray enough. So I'm just going to add in the dark area that I see. Okay, and the rest we'll do with some white ink. Okay, I have my ink, and I'm gonna put some in my lid. And I'm gonna paint in where I see the lightest part of the dewdrop. And for this one up here, it's not like a really hard highlight. It's just really light through here. So I'm going to let that dry for a second, and then I can pop in a really bright highlight. And then for this one, it's actually like right in here where the tree line is, or this green. It's like a really defined edge. And I'm going to add a little bit of white there. And for the one at the bottom, it's pretty much the same thing. It's a really defined area. I want to make sure I get this circular rounded edge. And then it gets really bright right here. Yeah, it's really hard not to lose your edge. So I'm going to leave it like that, and I think I'm going to pop one more into the two at the top. Down here and maybe right there. So there are the dewdrops on the petals, and I think I'm going to call it good for this third spring mini. And I might, now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, maybe I should go back in and add a little bit of a darker wash, but I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it like that. Anyway, I hope you had fun watching this and it gave you a little bit of inspiration. Maybe you'll try painting a couple of dewdrops of your own. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you'll be able to get the next videos. We're going to keep on with this spring mini series for probably the next couple of months, right through May. So I hope you had a good time, and let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, and I will see you next time. Take care.